Hello and welcome to Prepper Talk Radio. It is Wednesday night. This is our live. Thank you, all of you who are already here and waiting. And a special shout out to those of you guys who are going to be listening to this on the replay. You are listening to Prepper Talk Radio. This is radio for the radio minded, the podcast for the prepared, brought to you by survivalfrog.com. You can get your IOSAT tablets, all your nuke ready stuff. You can also get the tastiest food storage meats that are already cooked. So you can just crack that can open and dig in during the apocalypse. It is tasty goodness, the good for up to 25 years. Use the code PrepperTalk10, the number 10, to save 10% on everything you order site-wide. Guys, welcome to the show. We got Paris and Shane up above me on the video. How you guys doing?
Fantastic.
I made it back. I'm back. I was behind enemy lines. For all of you in CA, California, I salute you for staying there and holding down the fort. I was there. I made it back, and I made it back. See, it was funny because one of my friends was like, "Dude, you're going to California on election week. Like, do you think you're going to come back?" I'm like, "Oh, bro, that's a good point. I did come back. I'm safe. Everything."
We didn't have to pay a ransom.
No, I did. Oh, that's so funny, dude.
And yeah. I think we also need to say that starting tomorrow, Paris can kick and stretch and kick just like me.
What?
Right?
This is my last day. This is my last day as a 40s.
In his 40s.
They're leaving me behind. 40s. Shane has left me. Paris is now leaving me. I'll be a lone man in the 40s.
You got some catch up to do anyway. So
we'll get the 50s prepared for you, bro. Shane's got it ready for me, and Shane and I will now work to get it prepared for you. So when you hit 50, we'll already know what to tell you.
Passing the baton.
Well, we're rounding it out. Well, this is going to be a fun show. Tonight, we're going to kick and stretch and kick our way into diversifying our preps. The whole idea of putting all your eggs in one basket is, we've heard it over and over again in prepping. It is probably the most dangerous thing you can do, is to not diversify, not to expand. Not just your stuff, right? But also your skill set, your mindset, and everything else. So we're going to dive into quite a few different things that kind of hit that topic. And Utah Mike's pointing out that 60s are the new 50s.
I sure hope so.
I think so. I look at the people I grew up with. We all look a whole lot better than our parents did at our age. Our health is better.
At least we think we do.
Oh, the pictures don't lie. Like it's crazy. But there's something about, I think our longevity's increased, but our health quality has decreased in the United States.
We're just so vain, right?
It's interesting because I stayed with my parents when in California, and my dad's going to be 80. I think my dad just turned 83. And one of the nights so he dropped me off at the airport Thursday night, and then he was going to go run like stadiums, like do the stadiums up and down the steps of the stadium to be just for exercise. And then he was going to go hike a mile or two or whatever. I'm like,
that's awesome.
Dad, you're 83, dude. Like, I was like, how do you do it? I'm like turning 50 next week, and I'm I work out regularly, but it's like, man,
it's because he's got all the kids out of the house.
Yeah, it's such a good example to me.
Just need to get them out of California next, right, Paris?
Yeah.
Well, what I'm mainly interested in today's conversation, if I could chime in, is, we talk about not putting all your eggs in one basket. And I think Paris can really chime in on this, because where that kind of comes from is the financial world, right, Paris? I mean, that's where it's most relatable, is not putting all your eggs in one basket. But in prepping, in preparedness and survival and homesteading and whatever you want, bugging in, bugging out, what does that look like? And how's it done? And I think it's still a little confusing. What does that really look like?
Let me put if I might, can I put a guardrail on the other side of that? So you don't want to have, if you have a dozen eggs, you don't want to have a dozen baskets. That's too few eggs. Too many baskets. So I would say have 3 baskets with 4 eggs each, or 4 baskets with 3 eggs each, as an example. So you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, but you don't want to have too few eggs in too many baskets, because then the chaos of that is going to just overwhelm you. So I would say have there's a point of diminishing returns. So make sure that you have as many eggs in each basket as makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense in prepping. Sorry, to cut you off there, Scott.
Keep going.
I think you can have too much
Mm-hmm.
prepping. You need to have some commonality to things, and we can get into that. So yeah, I think if you spread yourself too thin, you need to have, one is none, two is one, three is just right. Whatever the saying could be.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a balance for each one of us that is a very personal decision. Sorry, Scott.
Well, no, I think that's very apropos to bring that up. I think when we talk about diversification of preps, like, you've also got to be wise. Like, oh yeah, I've got 4 baskets of eggs. 2 of my baskets of eggs are sitting next to my generator and all the fuel. It's not a good place to put them.
Okay.
No,
Yeah,
right?
it's a good
So
idea.
being
Good thought.
smart about where we're putting things, but also being smart about where we're spending our time. And I like where you started going, is like kind of the mindset and skill set of where we're diversifying ourselves. Like, there are people who isolate themselves because they get so deep into prepping that nobody else is part of their lives anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then they isolate further by bugging out early. And now, don't get me wrong, I want to bug out to a small community and stay there.
My ears are burning,
I
Scott.
don't have to bug out again afterwards, right? What's that?
My ears are burning.
Your ears are burning. No, they shouldn't be, because I'm thinking of people who have gone so far off grid and away from society that when people do interact with them, they're difficult to understand or communicate with because they just seem crazy.
Well,
right?
That didn't help at all, Scott. My ears are still burning. No, I still see myself kind of in that as well, but at least I'm conscious of it, right?
Well, okay, here's another way to look at it. There was a guy that basically Blast from the Past movie. You guys remember that, where there's Brendan Fraser, his parents build a bunker because they're worried, and then an airplane crashes over their house and they're locked in the bunker for like 45 years or whatever. He comes walking out and goes and finds a new girlfriend and falls in love and becomes mega wealthy because they cash in all their Apple stocks and all this other stuff, right? Well, what's funny is there's an actual guy that kind of happened to. He went into his bunker for a few years and came out. And when he came out, he's like, what happened? Nothing happened. He went in because of Y2K, came out a few years later, and he's like, people thought he was dead or went missing. They hadn't seen him in 3 to 5 years. I can't remember how long it was. It was a fascinating story. I remember coming across it, and I was like, this is exactly why you want to stay in touch mentally, emotionally, and physically with the people around you so that you don't bounce out early and become like some hermit in a cave for 3 years.
Yeah.
Because if you did that, Shane, how would your wife react to you? And if you came out 3 years later and she finds out it was all for naught,
it would be really bad. It would be really bad. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that is putting all your eggs in one basket, is closing yourself in, shutting yourself in. I think I would very much like to, stay at my bug out location for weeks or months on end, and definitely unplug. And I think there's, that's maybe the dream of a lot of guys, right? Get out of society in general, unplug from the matrix. So there's that aspect of it. But yeah, we also talk about, jack of all trades, master of none is, usually better than a master of one. And so I think that is also diversifying your preps as well. Like we talk about skills, mindset and so forth. I think being a jack of all trades, as much as you're able to, changes your mindset. And I don't want to be, I just had a kind of a derogatory thought there that I'm not going to say towards college educated people. There I said it.
It's all right. I'm the only one here with
and that's kind of the issue with having a master's or a PhD. You're so focused on certain things. That's kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. So I guess that's where that thought is leading me right there, right? And so that's my experience. I'll shut up about that. But
no, I think another thing too is like you want to have diversity in your food. Although as I was thinking about preparing to say that, while you were talking, Shane, I thought about how Joseph in Egypt It was grain and corn. Like, that's not much diversification.
Yeah,
so I wonder what
true.
else they stored too that we don't know about, that's not written in the Bible, the record there. But I was just thinking, like, grain, like how many different varieties of recipes can you do with grain and corn? Like, so I definitely feel like I have I have my 90-day pantry, and I have all the spices there that I want. I have some long-term stuff. I have some freeze-dried stuff. I have some dehydrated stuff, and I have just plain old number 10 cans stuff. So I feel like there's some, you can get so caught up in, oh no, I need to have more of this or that or the other. Or you can just say, you know what, my family likes this kind of food.
Yep.
Let's just get a bunch of that. And you don't need to be diversified with all the cool, recipes that Mountain House just came out with if your family doesn't like those. So don't get caught up. That's the other thing too, is like the shiny object syndrome can be just as easily for us gearheads, that we spend money on stuff we really don't need, where we should be spending more, taking those resources and filling in the gaps, and just really doubling down on the places where we know the food we are good at, and then maybe even take some time to have some skill sets. I think that taking some time to diversify your skill sets is very critical too.
Well, I love this comment in the chat. Thank you, Mike, for this. After doing an inventory this past weekend, no more long-term food storage for me. I need more short-term food. That, I think, is one of the wisest things, because a 90-day pantry, and we harp on this a lot, or a 90-day home store, right? Not just food, water, food, medications, cleaning supplies, like all the different things you use, 3-in-1 oil, right? For lubricating things, gasoline, whatever it needs to be, extending to a 90-day home store, and then having long-term food storage beyond that. The things that are going to hit us the most are kind of speed bumps of life, an injury, right? A car accident, losing a job. That's probably the worst one for most people right now. Loss of a loved one. Maybe someone in the house passes away unexpectedly or gets a terminal illness unexpectedly, right? That 90-day pantry is gold in those times.
Yeah, well, let's dig into that food storage a little bit deeper. What does diversifying your food preps, and not just diversifying, but putting them in different baskets, what does that really look like?
So I have food storage in 3 different locations in my house.
Ooh, that's
okay.
good.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if an earthquake happens, there's one section of my house that most likely I won't be able to get to. My long-term food storage is in there, because I don't want the stuff that I use a lot of in there, because if I use it a lot, I don't want to have to expend all my resources to get into there if there's an earthquake, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the only place likely to withstand everything, but also it's going to be the hardest to get into. So in there, I have a 2-week supply of short-term food that I don't have to cook. I don't have to do anything to prep. I can just eat it. I have a couple poop buckets with all the materials that go along with those, because I could be locked in there for 2 weeks, right? That's another scenario we talked on a prior podcast. But I also have in my office food storage, and then I have another room that has food storage. They're apart from each other specifically for this reason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want all my eggs in one basket in my house, but I also don't want all my eggs in one basket at my house. I've got some stuff at another location, right? I wish I had more at another location. Like you've got your bug out location where you can put stuff. I don't have a secure location to put additional stuff yet, but I have resources that I've pushed off to other people's homes that are in my sphere of safety or my personal preparedness network.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got some of their stuff here, and it balances each other out. So if they have to evacuate their place and come here, they can. If I have to evacuate here and go there, we can. And we're not looking at each other like, oh crap, you're such a burden to me now.
Yeah. And I've been thinking about that as well. As most of us only have one nest. We only have one basket. Mm-hmm. We have our home, and that can be considered one particular basket. However, like you do, I also split my food storage up into different rooms, which can be a little more difficult to inventory or keep track of and so forth. But like you say, if it's in your basement and you can't access your basement because of an earthquake or flood or whatever, you have at least some diversification of having it in at least slightly different locations. And also an example of having a safe. You're not going to go put, let me say, you shouldn't put everything in that safe, right? Because first of all, it's a target. If your house is broken into and that's where everything is, you're probably going to lose everything. So diversifying where you put valuables or firearms or so forth, I think that's important within the larger basket, if that's all you have. But like you say, you've got maybe grandma's house is your other location or your bug out location. And there's also a lot of people who advocate for caches, having a cache along your way, which is a difficult topic if you ask me. I'm not a big fan at the moment of having an actual cache. That's not on my own property and so forth. But different options we can do that way as well for putting your food stores and those types of important things in different locations with minimal risk, because risk is the big question for me.
Explain that cache idea, because I've seen it on TV and videos and people do it, but explain it a little bit for our listeners.
Well, if you're bugging out, and which is last priority unless you have a place to go to, right? The idea of having a cache is strategically placing things along your path. If you think you're going to have to walk there or drive or whatever, having a hidden stash somewhere in type of weatherproof enclosure on Forest Service property or BLM or whatever, or at other known locations that maybe you bury or just hide, which is not a very attractive option for me.
Do you get the coordinates when you put it there so that you can find it again? Or
and that's the sticky part, is how exactly do you do this? What does that really look like, and how practical is it? For me, at this point, it really isn't a practical thing.
Well, I look at it this way: like, okay, if I'm going to put a cache or cache, however you want to say it, of items along my path, they're gone immediately. Right. I have to remember it's out of mind, out of sight. It's gone. Here's the problem with having that. I don't have one path out of town. I have 4, right? And I don't have one rally point that I'm going to. I have 2 that are in my first wave of relocation. And so I can't, in good conscience, put anything in a cache, because if there's an earthquake, that cache may be completely unable. I may never be able to get to it again. Or if I have to go a different route, I may never be able to get to it again. If I only have one path to go down, okay, maybe this will work. But having my stuff at other locations with other people who are security for that, great option, right? If you have that. If you don't have that, start building your network, make friends, look in our group at Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance on Facebook, see if anybody else in your area, kind of pal around and find out who you trust and who you don't trust.
Well, kind of reminds me of those spy movies where the guy gets like Jason Bourne or something, right? And he goes to the bus station and this locker that he's had for 20 years that's got all his passports and a set of $300,000 in cash or something, like, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like I think that's a good point, Scott, because you want to how many paths out of town can you really have a cache along that path, and then it just starts to get really expensive, because now you're like, okay, well, I got 4 ways out of town. I got to get 4 of everything. So I put one in, each. At some point, you just got to think, well, I'm going to have a locker in a bus station with all my passports and a bunch of cash so I can get out of it. You know what I mean? So you Jason Bourne it a little bit, but I think that's a good point to have a cache. Maybe if that's something that you can do and that's the scenario for you, that's a good idea. That doesn't sound like the scenario for you though, Scott.
Do you guys know who Andrew Bustamante is?
I've heard the name.
Sounds familiar.
So he's been on the podcast circuit lately. Former CIA operative, spy guy.
Okay, I know who he is. I know who he is. Yeah.
He completely obliterated preppers the other month. He's like, oh, if you're putting all your stuff in one location or thinking you can stay in a hostile environment for very long, you're out of your mind. When something goes sideways, you have to be mobile. You have to be able to move from location to location, not stay there very long, and have a cache or safe house everywhere you go. He had billions of dollars in resources from these departments setting up safe houses. So when you hear that, yeah, there's great information in it, but the reality of it is garbage for prepping. right?
Yeah, for the ordinary everyday guy, you're not going to be able to do that.
Any other scenario, it's just beyond common sense, and it to me, it's whimsical to hear someone say that from that vantage point. Yeah, you're a spy. You've got a lot of credibility in the spy arena, but none of that applies to the common Tom, Dick, or Harry, right? To us. We have to look at our situation, and for those listening, you have to look at your situation and say, what is possible? What is probable? What can I afford to do?
What's likely?
Can I not? What can't I afford to skip? Like, what do I have to do, right? And prioritize your time and your preps that way. But honestly, I think the biggest lack or the biggest eggs in one basket thing is our library of information, our database of prepping and survival skills. How many of you have all of it in one room in your house and all these books that you plan on using when things go sideways and you haven't been digesting them on the regular, putting them in here? I'm pointing to my head for those of you who aren't watching the video. If you're not digesting books as part of your rotation of skills on prepping, skills on homesteading, skills on camping, skills on shelter building, skills on water purification, if you're not regularly putting that into your brain, that is your biggest danger to me.
Yeah, I think for me, an example that I had gone through in my head that talks about, different functions and processes and sources, methods, and so forth of diversifying skills, or like, for example, take water filtrations, purification, and so forth. The Sawyer is kind of the go-to filter, right? What kind of filter is it? Are you familiar with a type of filter? What other types of filters or purification methods are there out there, and how many do you have? Do you just have one type? Do you have gravity? Do you have pump? Do you have ceramic and carbon filters? And I guess the Sawyers are, what are they called? They're called the hollow fiber membrane. There's chlorine dioxide. There's chlorine. There's UV. There's so many different ways that you can sterilize and purify and filter water. How many do you have? How many are you familiar with? And like you say, is that knowledge in your head to where it is redundant and automatic, and all those eggs may be in this one basket up here in your head, right? But I don't know how you could diversify that other than having maybe printed materials. Like, I know you, Scott, you keep a binder. Have a thumb drive with a lot of information on it that you can access if you have a computer and have power at the time. So I think those are some ways. Yeah, there you go. Your binders. You can diversify your knowledge, teaching other people in your family, your spouse, your kids. Okay, if I'm incapacitated, here's how you are going to purify water, clean the water for the family.
So in my binders, I have cheat sheets on things to help me get through things. I've got tons of foraging and wild edibles cheat sheets because I haven't done it in a long time, right? I have a copy of this binder in my bug out bag, as well as in my library over here. And then I've got this checklist one. We go through all the different things in here on how to deal with emotional distress, things with our kids. Like, I've got a child that's autistic. And so I've got helps and kits, and I'm not going to say, hey, here's a resource, download it, because none of it's mine. I had to go find it and pay for it. But helping him understand and communicate, I've got this little chart. So when he's having a hard time, it's really hard to communicate sometimes. But if we can identify how he's feeling and he can point to something, he'll start opening up, right? So understanding your family situation and having resources on hand that you can use, having things ready to go. If you need to relocate, how do you deal with that with your kids? If you don't have more than one filtration or purification method, what's the next thing you should get? I personally believe get 1 to 2 filtration systems and 1 to 2 purification systems, and expand from there.
Yeah. And the great one is that H2Go purifier we just had a great interview about. I think they're still on back order, but if you want to go get one of those, use Prepper Talk and get a $6 off. I think it's worth it.
Yeah, totally go to h2gopurifier.com. They are on back order, but they're supposed to be in stock here in a couple of weeks. So hurry and order it now, back order it now, so you'll get notified and charged first, and it'll just get shipped right out to you.
Yeah, they're very cool.
Another one of the reasons why I brought up having too many eggs in one basket is, I know we've been talking about like food storage and whatnot, but my brother-in-law has a lot of firearms, and he's got so many bullets of different calibers. And I'm just like, bro, like he could probably, if you live, he lives in California, but I'm not going to tell you where, but if he could arm the neighborhood probably with the guns that he has and all the different calibers. And I'm like, part of me is like, this is cool to have so many rifles and handguns and other things. But the other part of me is like, bro, like you got so many calibers in here that how do you, like, if you needed to be mobile, you can't carry them all. Number one. Number two, like, what is the likelihood of you finding? So when I was looking at my guns, I was like, what is the most common ammunition? If I was, a neighbor, like let's say I'm traveling and I'm in a neighborhood that's been deserted and I go into someone's house, if there's going to be a treasure in there of brass, I want it to be the most common brass potential, or at least have the highest chance of getting it. So that's why I chose 9mm, but that's not why everybody, you do your own thing and choose your own way. But that was the kind of thing I was like, always confused. Like, why does he have so many different types of guns? Why doesn't he stay focused on a certain caliber so that he can have that just really solid? So there's, if somebody out there has some great information on why you should have diversity in calibers. Of course, you want a hunting caliber, and then you want to have a self-defense caliber. I get that. But it's like what's funny is he will order stuff and have it shipped to me because he can't get it in California. And so it's like, bro, how many different calibers of gun? Maybe that's why I'm so cognizant of how many types of bullets he has. But
he's also a single guy, right? So let's.
No, that's my brother-in-law.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay. Oh, okay. Your brother-in-law. Okay.
Yeah,
Never mind.
My brother-in-law's married.
So
he's got a couple kids.
I have a neighbor who's doing the same thing. And I talked to him about it. I'm like, and he's into prepping. His wife is a nurse, an emergency room nurse. And so she made her kitchen to be a first response area for disasters. So that people can come and she can take care of them. Her kitchen island is a little bit lower than it's supposed to be, but it's at the right height so she can work on people. And I'm like, doesn't that annoy you? And she's like, no, I'm short enough that it works great. Her husband hates it because he's tall.
Okay.
But she's like, this is the perfect height for me to work on people. I'm like, you're going to work on people here? She's like, yeah, I have a sterile environment and I can do this and that. And she's got all this stuff, right? But he, on the other hand, has huge weapons cache. And what's funny is he's like, it's his museum.
Oh.
He has tons of things. Somehow, I don't know how you do this, but he somehow got it classified as museum pieces. And now he has special insurance for it, but he also has a special tax deduction for that space. I don't know how it all works, but he was trying to explain it to me one time. And I'm like, that's really quite interesting. But he said, I will not use 80 to 90% of these guns ever. Because if things go sideways, I'm going to use these guns. And he started listing off his 9mm, his 12 gauges, his 308s, his 223. Like he's just like, all the NATO rounds, like all those things are what he's like, this is what I'm going to use. All this other stuff, that's for fun.
Yeah, that's
he's
cool.
Like, they're not for reality.
If you have the ability, yeah, absolutely.
And then I have another neighbor who he only has one caliber, but he's got 20 plus semi-auto rifles in that caliber. And I'm not even going to guess on how much ammo. He showed it to me one day and I'm like, what the heck? And he goes, yeah, this is to pass out to the neighborhood if there's problems. And I'm like, dude, half the neighborhood is already armed, but this is awesome.
Yeah, that's so
this
cool.
is great. And I'm fortunate enough to have a former police officer just up the street from me who's also an armorer in like 20 different types of guns. And he's a blacksmith, so he's always building stuff. When I move, I'm going to be kicking myself a little bit because I've got some amazing resources here. But I've also have goals and dreams of where I want to be. But like, yeah, all of your eggs in one basket in one caliber, kind of scary. But all of them in like 1,000 different things.
Yeah, too many. It's too much.
Insanity, right? Hard to manage, hard to keep organized as well.
I've heard that the good diversification in firearms is a handgun, a couple handguns, a rifle for hunting, a shotgun for defense, and a 22 rifle for like picking off small rodents for, small meals. And that's a really good, if that's like a bare minimum, 4 or 5 of those and you're set. And then from there you can obviously expand and grow as your budget allows, but you should have at least that. And that's where I still got to get my 22 rifle. I want to get one of those breakdown ones, the Henry
Ruger 1022 takedown.
I got one of those. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think would be I think is a great resource for home defense, and you can laugh at me, but the science backs it. A t-shirt launching gun. The ones they use in the stadiums.
Yeah. Like, is that like a potato gun?
Efficient with potatoes.
That's awesome.
Or soda cans.
Soda cans. Or other things of similar cylindrical size. Like, they don't have much penetrating force. But if you want to put a beanbag in there and knock somebody on their keister, that's a great way to go, because they're also going to have to go to the hospital for a rib cage being broken if it's short.
Right? Yeah, for sure.
Short area. And having had my ribs broken, it's not fun. You can't do anything when you have all your ribs broken.
That's a very good point.
I've been looking into that as kind of a fun, hey, it'd be fun to have a t-shirt cannon, but then I'm like, what are the practical applications I could use this in prepping? And I'm like, wow, these things launch.
Well, the reality is that we all think we're tough, that we can shoot somebody and defense, even if it's legit self-defense and you're an attacker. And some of us may have the mental fortitude to come out of that without having a bunch of issues. But my firearms instructor, and he's been on our show several times, Todd, he says, dude, the adrenaline dump after you'll get sick. You probably puke. Most people do. And so having a less lethal option, I think, is another way to diversify your protection, is because you want to, if you can stop them without, first of all, you don't want to clean, if it's in your house, you don't want to clean up all the blood anyways, because that's just gross. But, you got a less lethal option, then you stop them and you can get away in time. And then you're not having to deal with the ramifications of just taking someone's life, which is a mental thing as much as anything.
That's a deep conversation for another day as well.
Yeah. Diversifying preps diversifying our safety and our protection preps.
So also, how does this apply to, say, people? I was thinking about that as well, to our groups. Some of you might have mags, but to, family, neighbors, so forth, having some diversification there as well. Maybe I'm not thinking entirely clearly here. I tend to be more, or I just find myself more of a lone wolf, because most of my family will not end up joining me until it hits the fan, right? Until things become real, and then they actually open their eyes and see, what's happening.
Your extended family?
In particular, extended family in particular, and even in my own house, they just like, oh, let Dad knows what he's just let him do his thing, right? And and I'm happy to do this, but was thinking, how do we diversify that a little bit, right? Without sharing too much, or getting to know people that will actually be detrimental to us when it hits the fan, right? How do we include those people and exclude? That's a big topic for me that I'm still just kind of diving into. So if you have any thoughts and comments here, I'd love to hear that.
Well, I've actually ran into that. So
yeah, you said earlier being a master of you said
jack of all trades.
Jack of all trades, master of none, but a master, whatever. Always if you have more, then it's better than one.
Yeah.
I think that it's good to have, like, if you're going to be have a comms for someone who's going to focus on comms, but still have the ability to take over some other area. Maybe someone focuses on first aid, someone focuses on organization, someone focuses in on safety and protocols that way. So I think it's good to have a couple guys in your neighborhood locally that you can trust, that are going to focus on one area, but still have the capacity. If that guy goes down, they can still kind of shift and take their spot and still maintain that. That's one of the things that I really respect about, like, the SEAL teams, because they all train in everything, but then they each have their focus. And I think that's a really good way, in my opinion. That's a good example of how we can do it here in our local communities with our neighborhoods.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the most the safest way to diversify when it comes to your group is I still am an advocate for a small group, not a large mag like you hear a lot on YouTube. I really am not comfortable with that, but convincing family or close friends that are well known to specialize in certain tasks. Because, like, for example, if I'm the first aid guy and then I'm in the one in need of first aid, am I SOL, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for those who are unfamiliar with the term MAG, it's a mutual assistance group, right?
Yeah, there we go.
What you're referring to?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So your community or your MAG, I look at it this way. Like, I've had people both in church and in my family ask everyone to put together a list of their preps and their skill sets. And those are the people, without a doubt, I will never give that information to.
Mm-hmm.
However well-intended they are not ever going to get that information. The people who I will give some information to, like you two, I'll give tons of information to, right? Most of the time it's because I'm asking questions on something and wanting your feedback, or we're brainstorming on something together, right? But it's never a security issue.
Yeah, or I've come over to your house and you're like, dude, you got to check out what I just got. And I'm like,
yeah,
dude.
And vice versa. And so like with those, especially like with church, I was like, I'm sorry, but that's not your information, or not information you're entitled to. And they're like, well, no. So we can help the community. I'm like, and when it's been church groups, I always point out the parable of the 10 virgins. Mm-hmm. I'm like, look, the 5 that were prepared were good. They had their oil and they're good. The 5 that weren't prepared, they had to kick bricks. They had to go out in the community and go find stuff and buy their own stuff. That's what this is. That's what you're asking me to do, is to give them my oil. I'm not going to do that. The other part of it, when it was family, it was like, look, you guys know that I'm far more prepared than you. You guys know that I have a plan for every scenario. And you guys know that I'm trying to be as diversified as possible, but you also like to make fun of me for it. And because of that, you've eliminated yourself from the proximity of contribution, meaning nothing will be given to you in time of need. And now you're asking me to put together a list of all my stuff so that we can all have a plan together. I've offered opportunities in the past to get you involved in plans. I will not do it anymore. If you want to know what to do, listen to my podcast.
Or say, hey, I will volunteer 1 generator. That's it, right? I will volunteer 1 item for the group, and limited that.
Yeah, and there's certain food storages that I keep just because I'm like, that's giveaway pile, right? It's nearing its end of lifespan, and so I'm like, I'll put that in the donate pile if something happens in the next few years. But if I'm not able to use it quick enough, right, that's kind of where that goes. But I think it's a fool's errand to try to get people involved too fast, because it overexposes yourself. And having a MAG, I think, is extremely difficult to do at this late stage in the game.
I agree.
If you haven't already been building a good solid group, I feel like it's going to really come down to, in the next 10 years, we're going to be in scenarios where we're in tribes, we're in small groups of people who've survived whatever's come and gone, and that's how we survive to the point of now we can rebuild, right? The people who haven't been preparing, who aren't willing to prepare, they're going to be gone in the first wave. The people who have kind of prepared, they're going to last 30 to 90 days. And the people who have prepared physically, spiritually, and pantry, they're going to be the ones that are going to be able to start rebuilding. And that's, I think, what everyone needs to spend more time focusing on is, do I have the mental capacity to rebuild and the fortitude to endure whatever comes? Because that's where I think most preppers have not gotten themselves to.
Yeah, absolutely. The new ones. Yeah, I think a lot of, at least my family, friends, and so forth, really don't have that mental capacity to even begin to contemplate the options. And I'm thinking here, since we're kind of coming close to the end, is the most likely scenario that I see at the moment, with this Trump euphoria that's going on right now, nothing has really changed. I mean, very little has changed. I think the biggest danger right now is financial danger. So maybe we should spend the last few minutes talking about how to diversify financially, what is really best to do right now. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I love that idea.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Since Paris is the expert here, I mean, I obviously have my list here, but
this is not investment advice. This is
exactly.
advice.
And if you talk to me, I got your advice. I got two things to recommend, and that's it. So maybe you should listen to me all the time, right?
Let's start off with
gold, silver, maybe some cash. That's it. Okay, end of story. But that's not realistic. Obviously, you see what the markets are doing now. Maybe you should be in the markets for now, because ride the wave. I mean, who knows?
Well, I think that if you have all your preps, and what does that mean, right? All your prep, like how is there? Can you really have all the preps you need, right?
No. Yeah.
But if you have a substantial amount of preps and you still got extra money, like going into a 401k or something like that, then I would say just get it into something a little more balanced. Don't be so aggressive right now, because you're gonna, with the volatility in the market, you want to ride the wave a little bit, but at the same time be kind of conscientious that it could be crashing at any minute, which is still part of the deal. And I feel like, I just hope that this doesn't happen. But I feel like when people get the guy they think is going to save them into the position where they think that he can save them, that they start to get complacent, or they start to say, well, we don't need to prepare as much anymore. And I feel like that's the time to really buckle down. You don't fix your roof when it's raining. You fix your roof when it's sunny outside. You don't look for a job when you just lost one. You should have a job already lined up while you're working, so that you can transition. So it was an old book that I read, Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And that's just really good advice. And so I would say, if you've got your preps in order, then you want to be, there's this thing that I have, that if you're in debt, you're a slave. Another thing that I've just started to realize, though, is like, I have a mortgage payment. I've basically created my something that I'm obligated to. I've a contractual obligation to pay that thing. Well, if I have to pay it, then that means I have to go make the money to pay it. Now I'm a slave to the mortgage. I'm a slave to the car payment. I'm a slave. Like, honestly, I've just started really thinking to myself, like, why do I have all these payments? Stop. Like, get myself to a place where I have some financial freedom and build financial freedom. And I'm reading a new book that's just come out recently about this. And so that's kind of where my mind is. But I just think it's really important to get out of debt, get some money in savings, and then get your stuff that you need. And if that's like, my emergency fund is part stuff and part money. And so that's something that I really believe in. And then get out of debt, for goodness sake. Stop being a slave to that. And you want to make America great again? Make the individual, our nation is the building blocks of any nation is the people within that nation. And if we're in debt and if we're slaves, where do you think our nation is going to go? And to me, that's one of the, now there's many ways to make America great again. I think that's definitely one of them, is to make yourself great again and build your net worth, get your confidence back, and learn some skills financially and diversify your money. And really diversifying is get out of debt, get a savings account, and then take a look at where you can put the rest of it if you've got all your preps.
Yeah, I think the key to that is savings, because everything right now rotates on debt, right? It's the credit markets that are probably going to collapse first and take everything with it. So early 1900s, early 2000s, well, even before then, what drove the markets was the savings of the people and not the debt. And then I guess it was about the early 70s when the dollar came off the gold standard, is when it changed more to a credit, because they could print money without being tied to anything really at that point. So it is savings that will actually grow this country. So I think that is where we need to get out of debt and save. And from an investment point of view, savings does not make people rich, right? You can't save your way to wealth. You got to find a way to grow it. And that is very personal. So I think part of my closing statement would be to say, is make your own decisions. Don't listen to us. At least I am very biased myself in the way I do things. And because I'm in my 50s now, I can kick and stretch and kick and I'm happy that I make my own decisions. I really am. I don't rely on anybody else to make my own decisions. I'm pretty stubborn that way, and definitely recommend you guys to take everything we say with a grain of salt.
So there's a phrase that says, "He who has the gold makes the rules."
Amen.
Right? If you have the resources, you make the rules. We talked about our groups before. Now we're talking about finances. If you have the stuff, you make the rules, right?
Yeah.
I have preps, and so there are rules concerning my preps. When it comes to making decisions for my family and my life, like I've got an equal partner, I've got to go through the process. We got to talk about it. We got to formulate opinions. We got to go to the Lord and determine, okay, what are we going to do? But like at the end of the day, it's like you have to have tangible assets. I don't have a 401k anymore. And I know it panics Paris every time we talk about long-term finances, investment strategies. I'm on the complete opposite end of it at this point in my life. And that was a hard place for me to get because I used to have a ton in there in 401ks and IRAs and Roth IRAs. And I had all these different vehicles that I was investing in. And I pulled out of all those because I had a prompting to. And I put my money into gold and silver and tangible preps. I feel like a little bit like Joseph in Egypt, storing everything up for Pharaoh, right? Those things, that for me financially has been the best thing I've ever done. And so my advice is listen to everything we have to say. Paris has fantastic advice. Shane has fantastic advice. I have fantastic advice. But find out what's right for you and do that. Because what was right for us when I've lost jobs or when we've had paychecks all of a sudden stop, our food storage was the number one thing that got us through the rough times.
Mm-hmm.
And our cash on hand, our savings, our personal savings, like we save money on hand. We save gold and silver on hand, but we also have it diversified. We have money in the bank too, right? We haven't completely abandoned modern society and civil requirements and whatever and blah, 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 right? I still have to pay my taxes and all that garbage, but you've got to figure out what works for you, but you've also got to look at your situation and say, okay, is what I'm doing working or not? Do I have what I need to endure a 3-month disaster? Most of us don't. If you lost your job for 3 months, how would you survive? If you lost your income?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you have a skill that you can go trade for time and money? Do you have knowledge that you can sell and make some money, right? There's a number of different things you can do to go make additional money somehow, but man, it's nice having stuff on hand so that you don't have to stress about that. Paris, you said earlier about it's the best time to dig a well is before you're thirsty.
Yeah.
Right. If you lose your job and you have to go find a job to survive, you're in a tight spot. If you have a job and you start looking for another job and you get a new job and then leave that job, that's great, right? That sounds fantastic and ideal for most of us. But if you're like, I hate my job, I quit, and now you're like, oh, now I'll go find another job. That's insanity. And a lot of us are prepping and living that way. We're like, oh, forget this. I'm going to go do my own thing. Well, no. Do your own thing. Build it up to the point where you've got that personal investment, right? That personal savings. I look at my entire preps are my savings, right? Not savings the way most people think of it. They're like, oh yeah, I'm getting a 12% return on this. No, this is my saving me from downtimes, saving me from my personal apocalypse, right? My personal doomsdays. That's what it saved me from. Do I have investment vehicles? Kind of, sort of, yeah, but not really. Like it's different than what other people think. And I'm working on changing that a little bit, but I'm not your typical guy. And so don't do what I do if it doesn't resonate with you, right? Find out what works best for you. And if you have investment advice that you want to go get a real good analysis on what you're doing with your budget and how you're doing things, check out Paris's website and check out Paris's resources, because he's going to be able to steer you straight in a lot of those things.
It was funny because I met a lady that after she'd already made a move, I met her and she's like, Paris, what would you have advised me to do with she had a 401k and she was thinking like she should do gold and silver. And she met with an advisor and he's like, no, that's the craziest thing. Don't do that. That's ridiculous. And so she's like, Paris, what would you have told me to do? I said, well, depends on how much you have in your 401k, but I told you at least 20% into gold and silver, precious metals. And the other 80% depends, on how risky you want to be. But I'm actually kind of feeling more like 50% pressure. I mean, I'm moving more towards Shane's side of things over the years as I start to think about the safety of those things, especially with fiat currency the way it is and the economic markets. I mean, to me, Bitcoin is ridiculous because if the grid goes down, you just lost everything. You have no access to anything.
Well, same with your money in the bank.
And same with ones and zeros in the bank. It's like have cash on hand in case that still is good. But then gold and silver, you should have some of that on hand, and even barterable items. Like have some of that in your preps. Like there's some things. Will we ever get there? I don't know. But if we do, you'll be prepared. If we don't, you'll be prepared too. Like that's the cool thing about it.
And if you can afford a Bitcoin, why not?
Well, it's funny because like I love what Utah Mike said. He's like, hard to pay bills without cash preps, right? That's part of preps, like having a cash money supply available. The liquidity of it, the tangibility of having it on hand far outweighs not having it around. Like I can't tell you how many times I've just in the last 3 months, I can tell you I've had probably 7 instances where I was at a gas station or a grocery store or somewhere where all of a sudden their card readers weren't working.
Yeah.
Just yesterday in this area, T-Mobile was down for like an hour. So you can't, there's a segment of the population that's like, oh no, I've got my debit card. I'm always fine. You can't rely on that garbage.
Yeah.
I've had cash on hand, and so I've been king. I've been okay. That's part of the preps, like having redundancies. And that's what gives you safety, and that's what gives you peace of mind. And that's, at the end of the day, that's why we prep, right? Yeah. We want the peace of mind. Oh, man, we had a whole bunch of people jump in the last 10 minutes. Hi, Pete. Hi, Sandra. Hi, Grayman. Oh, Grayman's been here for a while. Hi, Grayman, anyways. And then I saw we also had JR hop in. Welcome. Good to see you, brother. Yeah, it's easy to forget why we're doing all this. And it's easy to get caught up on one aspect of our prepping and focus too much on that. It's always good to take a pause and reassess our situation and kind of break down how we're prepping, what we're prepping for, and see if maybe we need to diversify our time and our preps that way. Paris, you were going to say something?
I was just going to clarify. There is some debt that you got to get rid of and eliminate quick. Consumer debt for sure. I mean, if your debt's got, you're leveraging that debt for an investment, or you're leveraging it for a home, that's fine. Managing that debt is fine. I'm just saying that the consumer debt for sure, get out of that stuff. That's just not good because that's the stuff that'll kill you the fastest, and it's got the highest interest rates. But if you're using debt and leveraging it to build wealth, keep going, dude. More power to you. Keep doing it.
Great point. Any final thoughts on the night, guys?
No, I think I said my piece.
Yeah, I'm good.
Well, guys, if you want to go invest, here's one thing you can invest in that will always pay off. Go to preppertalkradio.com and check out. This is so cool. This is super cool. Check out our store. We have some sweet merch. It's shelter, right? Having clothes is shelter. That's the simplest thing of it. But you also have fun punchlines at parties, conversations, and as you run around town doing your thing. Like I'm wearing our SHTF shirt here.
These are all Scott's designs.
This is one of my designs. We've got our Ready-Minded shirts. We've got our Warrior in the Garden. Go check out the designs. We even have, for those of you who've been waiting forever, it's up there. Go check out our Apocalyptimus t-shirt, ready to be purchased. They are all print on demand. So they'll be printed and shipped immediately. It takes about 7 days to get most of the products. So,
Gray Man, if you want to, we do still have the super chat. And super thanks. So if you're watching a show later and you want to hit that button and give us a donate, that's fine. We'd love that. In fact, we just finalized all of our back-end stuff on YouTube for them to verify us. And so we're ready to receive on YouTube.
Rather you buy a shirt so that you have a shirt or some cool swag.
Yeah, that's true too. That's true too.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much for tuning in tonight and not tuning out. Thanks for hopping in the live, asking the questions you've asked, because, man, they've been pertinent. And last but not least, prepping is not gambling. You're not rolling the dice and taking a chance.
Amen.
Not prepping is gambling. So make sure you get yourself on task, have fun with this, and really just make prepping a normal part of your daily life, and it will always benefit you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of the Ready-Minded Brigade in here. And again, stay safe, keep the head on a swivel, and stay ready-minded.
See you next week.
Take care, guys.